I want you to imagine it's Monday morning, 7 a.m, your alarm goes off, but you hit snooze. 10 minutes later, it goes off again. You have a meeting at 9 a.m. Takes you about 40 minutes to get to work. You can hit snooze one more time. Goes off 10 minutes later, you get up, you have a shower, you have breakfast, you hop in the car, you drive to work, get on the motorway, and it's packed. You sit in stop-start traffic, and you think, if I'd just gotten up at 7, it'd be a clear run. So you make the decision to hop off at the next exit and take the back streets. You make it to the office with 2 minutes to spare, get to your meeting flustered, hair everywhere, not sure what's happening. Every one of us takes risks every single day. Some of those risks are small, like hitting snooze one more time, or having an afternoon nap with no alarm set at all. Others are a bit bigger, moving abroad, starting a new career, or jumping out of an airplane with nothing but a thin piece of fabric to prevent the inevitable fall. Whether they're big or small, we all identify, analyze, treat, evaluate, and monitor risks. So in my brief session, I want to cover a couple of key questions. I want to talk about what a risk is. Working with a couple of laboratories in my role as a trainer, there's a few misconceptions. So I want to tackle some of these. I want to talk about the why you need to address risk. Why does it matter? I want to talk a bit about how we can go about doing it. Some of the methods, some of the processes. And lastly, I want to lean into the inevitable uncertainty and ask, what if? So what is a risk? I imagine for many of us, this word conjures up concepts of danger and harm and fire and sirens and flashing lights. And for the most part, that's how many of us would define it. We would use the definition that it's the combination of the probability of harm, of the occurrence of harm, and the severity of that harm. How likely, how bad? This definition comes from ISO 22367, which is the Medical Laboratories Risk Management Guidelines. It's the same definition that's used in many of the safety standards, but we're going to break that one down in a moment. One of the things that's important about this definition is that first bit, the probability of the occurrence of harm. So it's not just the thing that can cause the harm, it's the exposure to it. So it's the hazard plus exposure equals risk. So imagine that you decide to go swimming in the ocean. It's nice, there's fish, it's fun. Cue Jaws music. What's the risk? The risk is getting attacked by a shark. If the shark wasn't there, there's no risk. There's no exposure. The shark alone is not the risk. The shark is the hazard. If you don't want to get eaten by a shark, don't swim where there are sharks. Easy fix. So let's jump out of the water and into the lab. You've got 2 patient samples. Let's ignore the fact that they don't have stoppers and they're very badly labelled with just some mysterious red liquid. Google image. Now I want you to imagine that those 2 patients accidentally get swapped. Is this a risk?
Yes.
Thanks for playing. This is the hazard. If you don't do anything with them, nothing bad can happen. So the first question I want you to ask yourself is, what is the risk of having a mislabeled sample? You're not going to get valid results. So then what's the risk of having an invalid result? Misdiagnosis. What's the risk of having a misdiagnosis? Mistreatment. And what's the risk of mistreatment? Death. Or at least some kind of harm. The risk is the outcome. The risk is that combination of how likely it is to happen and what will happen if it does. And this leads us nicely into the standard definition of risk within ISO. Just to be difficult, there's more than one. So only really the safety standards use that one I had before. The other definition of risk, you may have heard, the effect of uncertainty on objectives. This definition comes from 31,000, the Risk Management Guidelines Standard. This standard is really a little bit unique in that sense, or this definition, I should say, is a bit unique in that sense that risks aren't inherently bad. The effect could be good, or it could be nothing. So if we think about that patient sample, these are just our uncertainty factors. If you're testing a sample, do you know 100% that that sample belongs to that person? In an ideal world, it would be nice. But there's always going to be some little potential, some uncertainty. The harm is what happens next. Now, I don't know about you, but I got my money tomorrow night on the lottery. Fingers crossed. My boss won't be too happy if I win. Might take some extended leave. But we all know the inherent risk. Let's say you put $20 down. Risk, you lose your $20. Neutral, you get back $20. But what's the opportunity? What's tomorrow night? I think it's 30 million. You win $30 million. How many people are willing to lose $20 on the chance to win 30 million? Yeah, happy to. But it's still a risk because you don't know what numbers will come up. I'm going to show that I'm a little bit of a nerd and a geek. Who's watched Bridgerton? I have no idea what their names are. I just sit there and complain about the characters. That's all I do. In season 2, there's a great episode where they go to a horse race. And she says, whoever her name is, who are you betting on? And he goes, I'm betting on XYZ because it's bigger and stronger and faster. And she goes, well, that's why you'll lose. Because it rained last night, and so the ground is wet, and so he'll sink into it. You should have bet on ABC, because it's a lighter horse. So even though we don't know the outcome, we can put things in place to better our chances that it works in our favour. So again, let's go from gambling, I don't support that, into the laboratory. Imagine you want to introduce a new piece of equipment, or a new test method. I'm sure I could say, what are the risks? And we could list for days all of the things that could go wrong. It costs a lot of money. I've got to send somebody overseas to do training. It's so state-of-the-art that maintenance is going to be a problem. Our lab is out rural, so how are we going to get parts and services, etc.? But then I want you to think about the good that can come from it. Maybe it's really efficient. It halves your turnaround times. Maybe it's really automated, so your techie can start it, go away, do something else, and come back and it's finished. Maybe it, in the long run, is cheaper. Maybe it creates a niche market where nobody else is doing that test. So you're the only one in the country. These are the opportunities. All opportunities come with risk, but risks can lean towards opportunities. So then why do we need to bother? Why do we need to do risk? There are 3 big reasons I want to talk about. The first, nice and easy, it's usually the first one that comes up in a conversation. You have to do it for the standard. If you want accreditation, you have to do the tick and flick. We've looked at our risk. So risk matters because accreditation matters. But within this point, it's part of an improvement cycle. So our second reason is that whether you want to or whether it's for the standard, ultimately it's a means to an end to get a better system. So within these standards, there are 3 words that appear consistently, and they're the crucial central words that both 15189, the medical standard, and 17025 testing standard uses. Consistent, impartial, and valid. If you read the preface, the introduction, and clause 1, these 3 words are the purpose of the standard, to show that laboratories can operate consistently, act impartially, and get valid results. In 17025, they appear a number of times in the requirements. Asterisks, I'm also including words like consistently, consistencies, etc. So it's not purely that one. So consistent appears 8 times, impartial 11, valid 20. In 15189, fairly similar. 8 times, 13, 13. To add in 9001, which we don't credit or certify, but it is a management system standard, 8, 1, and 4. Why does risk matter? Because even though these are the central purpose of the standard, the reason the standards exist, risk appears more times than any of these words, and in some cases more than the addition of all of those words together. And this leads me to the third reason. It's the reason specified in 31,000, the risk management standard. The purpose of risk management is to create and protect value. But what do we mean by value? This is going to change for each of us depending on our organization. For some of us in, say, the medical field, the value is the treatment given to the patient to help them get better. Your role in that process is to make sure it's accurate, to make sure the test is the right test, to make sure they get that treatment to get well. If you are in food testing, it might be to make sure that the food that's consumed is safe to eat. If you're in asphalt or road testing, it might be to show that the roads that we drive on are quality, that we're not going to sink into the ground. Your value will change depending on your organizational industry, depending on your objectives. Your value might be to be the most profitable business in that area. So wouldn't you want to make sure there are things in place to protect those profits, to protect that outcome? That's what risk management is for. So how do we do this? This is where the standards, while that word appears 30, 40 times, is a little bit ambiguous. In 17025, it doesn't specify any kind of process or procedure. It just says the laboratory shall identify and address risks and opportunities. In 15189, it has a little bit more, that there will be processes to identify risk of harm to patient and opportunity for improved patient care. It also goes into a bit on responsibilities. But that's it. It doesn't say how. It doesn't give us any more. You could use 31,000 or 22367, but you could also make it up yourself. There are lots of different ways to identify risks. So this is kind of our first step. You could use a SWOT analysis, which is a great snapshot method to show what is good, what is bad, what is internally controlled, and what is externally enforced. Mind mapping or brainstorming allows you to see the connection between one area and another. It's not just equipment, it's the maintenance of that equipment. It's also the training of the personnel to use the equipment. And then training comes with competency. So competency and equipment might be connected. Fishbone, often used in cause analysis. It's great retrospectively for looking what happened, but can be used the other way as well. What could happen? And what are all of the different elements that might impact on it? 10 Ps is one I really like. If you ever come to our risk management course, we use this one. And when I give it to different groups to use, they kind of get freaked out because it's a lot of words, but then everyone leaves going, I love it. And it's basically 10 questions, all starting with P, that kind of scaffolds that structure. And the last one on their decision trees, how one action might then actually lead to future risks. So even though you address one risk, that in itself might create a new risk. In the same way that deciding to hit the snooze button in the morning might lead you to hit peak hour traffic, so then you make a new decision to get off at the next exit and take the back streets. As I mentioned, these are not required. No standard requires you to use any particular type. You don't even need to use these 5. You might have weekly meetings. You might approach it in a different way. It allows you to use your context. Following this, we need to do an analysis. We've identified the risk. So if we go back to that likelihood consequence, I imagine you've all seen a heat matrix of some description, making some kind of judgment on how bad it is, which will help you to prioritize it. Last year, my colleague and I were working on our risk management course, and we realized that all of the discussion that happens around risk is only about that negative. It's only about what can go wrong. There's very little discussion about what could go right. How can the opportunities exist? So we sat together and we put together the opposite kind of heat matrix, and we made an opportunity matrix. So ideally, where in the risk matrix, we want things to be down here. In our opportunity matrix, we want things to be up as high as possible. And we do this all the time. An example, looking at, say, universities, particularly in America, where they scout for sports persons in high school to get them to come in so that their sports team does really well. They give them all of the things that they want to try and ensure that they come to them, because the outcome that they can provide to the university is that they finally win that, I don't do sport, that final game, whatever you call it, grand final. I was a musician, can you tell? So, but the idea is that how you decide to analyze your risks, again, the standard doesn't say. It's kind of up to you. You can use heat matrix, there's GAMP5, opportunity matrix. You could just use a high, medium, low rating, whatever works in your context that allows you to prioritize different risks over others. When I give this activity or similar activities in my groups, everyone goes, oh, that's a high risk, that's a high risk, that's a high risk. If everything is a high risk, nothing is a high risk. Part of this is to be able to separate them. Yeah, the fact that our documentation was missing the signature, probably not great. NATA's going to pick that up. We won't be too thrilled, but it's not a mislabeled sample. Which one is worse? So we've identified, we've analysed it. We then need to do something to it to either prevent that negative outcome or promote that positive one. So we need to treat it. And again, different approaches. For a risk, you might choose to accept it. There's nothing we can do to lower it. We're just going to do it. We need to operate on the weekends because that's where we've got a big market, but nobody wants to because they don't want extra money. I don't know. But there's only one techie who's willing to sit there. But he's only worked for us for 2 months. Are we going to take that risk? Maybe you would, but maybe you're in an industry where that's not something that is plausible. We could transfer risk through insurance. If something goes wrong, you don't pay for it, somebody else deals with that. Side note, can't transfer reputation. That's kind of still on you. We could purely avoid it. If you don't want to be eaten by a shark, don't go in the ocean. If this particular test method is too difficult or has too many risks, don't do it. Or we could reduce it in some way. We can try and restrict the likelihood, or we can restrict the outcome. General rule of thumb, it's easier to reduce likelihood than it is to reduce consequence. If you take that patient sample, we can put things in place to try and make sure that we don't have any mislabeled samples. But if we do, there is still the chance of terrible, horrible, no good, very bad things happening. But we can do the same for opportunities. We can accept an opportunity. It's not going to be any greater than it is right now. Sure. We could share it. We could start a partnership. Maybe you are a rural lab, and maybe there's a courier service that does rural transit. So team up with them. Share in the profits. You use them exclusively. Maybe you can exploit it. You can find that niche market. I'm going to use the big, terrible words. AI at the moment is kind of a thing, and most of us kind of go, but maybe no one else is using it, so you can exploit that fact and wiggle into that opportunity. Or you could put things in place purely to enhance what's already there. So once we've decided on this treatment, we then need to act on it. One of the ways that I kind of really like is the PDCA cycle. If you've not heard of that before, it's the plan, do, check, act. It comes directly from 9001, the Quality Management System Standard. So we've decided which action we're going to take. We're going to reduce our risk. How? What are we going to put in place? Plan our actions. We then do the action. We implement the thing, or we change the way it happens. We need to check that it's been effective and then act on that. Risk management is not a static process. It's not a thing that you write down in a document somewhere and then leave. You look back at it. You check it again. Has it been effective? Does it work? No? Well, we need to fix that. Is taking the freeway the best option? No, okay. I can either stay on the freeway or I can exit. And lastly, acting to make sure that you're actually listening to what's happened, getting that feedback. So what do we do next? We've identified, we've analysed, we've treated, we've done our monitoring, evaluating. We need to record and report somewhere. One of our little phrases, if it's not recorded, it didn't happen. Now, you don't have to use a risk register, but it's one place where it's all there. You can know what happened, when it happened, etc. It also means it can get reported on easily to your management reviews. And when NATA goes, how do you do risk management? You can pull it out and go, here. So the last question I had was the what if. That uncertainty. What if it goes well? What if it doesn't? And I want to give you another little scenario. We're going to step out of the laboratory for the moment. I want you to imagine that you own a cafe. And yeah, it does well, but the profits have kind of, plateaued as they tend to. And I walk in and I say, what if you gave away your food for free? I want you to sit with that for a moment. And I want you to ask yourselves the next 3 questions. What's good about this idea? What's bad about this idea? And just what's interesting? So what is good about it? You're a cafe, and now I'm telling you to give away your food for free. You're busy? You're going to get lots of customers. Free food. Great, so you're busy. What's something bad? You've just gone broke. You've given away your profit margin. And what's interesting? Reduced food waste. I like that one. That one hasn't come up before. So this is a genuine scenario that happened. There was a cafe that realised that people were coming in, buying a $4 coffee, and sitting at a table for the next 2 hours while they worked. So that cafe has just lost a table for 2 hours, and someone's paid $4 for it. So instead, they charged people for a period of time. You came in and you paid, $12, and you got half an hour. And you sat at the table, and with that $12 came a coffee and a muffin, or a coffee and a bagel. And then after your half hour, you were asked, would you like to continue? Yes, I would. That's another $12. Here's your coffee and here's your bagel. Or they go, no, thank you, I'm okay. Get up and leave. Now that table is free again. A new customer can come in and see. And they found that the profits went up because people were paying more for a period of time and then leaving. So a new one comes in. So was it a risk? Yeah, big one. It could have lost all our profits. But there's that opportunity. And with every opportunity, there's going to be risk because risk is just the uncertainty. The biggest uncertainty that unfortunately hit that cafe was just a little thing called COVID, which kind of killed that idea. But that's part of the risk. It's part of the potential opportunity. And even though COVID created a bunch of risks for us, there's now flexible working hours in a lot of industries. There's work from home, there's different hours, there's different approaches to how to do work. So there has been positive outcomes, positive unknowns. So the key takeaways from today, if you remember nothing else, be a little bit sad, but we'll see what happens. A risk is not the source. We tend to want to think that it is. A risk is not, untrained staff. The risk is what they do. It's that next step. Whether you want to use the 2, 2, 3, 6, 7 definition or the 31,000, or you want to make up your own, it's about the next step. It's about the outcome. If you can ask yourself, what is the risk of? You probably haven't gotten to the risk yet. So if you think about that patient sample, what is the risk of a mislabeled sample? Invalid results. What is the risk of invalid results? Misdiagnosis, etc. Until you can go no further. What is the risk of death? Okay, so that's the outcome. Knowing how many what is the risk ofs tells you how important it is to protect your value, how important it is that you put things in place. If the absolute worst thing you can think of is, well, the turnaround times might be a little bit longer. Okay, we want to fix that, but it probably doesn't need as much as accidentally killing someone. Risks and opportunities are two sides of the same coin. With every opportunity, there are going to be risks because they are essentially the same thing. They are the uncertainty that comes with a decision. They are the unknown numbers of our lottery tickets. Good luck all. And lastly, understanding uncertainty isn't something to fear, but it can be something to be embraced. We can lean into it as long as we're trying to maintain and not let it run wild to becoming those deadly falling out of a plane risks. If any of this has been kind of just teetering on the edge of interest and you want to do a little bit more, this is my plug. Come to some of our courses. They're great fun.
So most risk analysis I have seen is regarding safety. Is this enough for 17025, or do you instead read more? I think it might say need more, but you could answer both. Need or read more.
My kind of inclination would be that it needs a little bit more. So 17025, 15189 are not safety standards, and so this is where safety tends to be about the hazard. If you've got the hanging electrical wire, yeah, that's a big issue, but it's only going to be a risk if people are in that room. So yes, it needs to be addressed, but 17025 is more about the outcome, particularly to the validity of results. So when it comes to the standard, it talks about risk of personnel, risk of equipment, risk of facilities not being the right temperature, as opposed to is there a fire extinguisher in the room? Hopefully that answers that. If not, come up to me afterwards. I'm happy to talk a bit more.